Daydream Believers with Elle and Elle. Elle, how the hell are ya?
I'm well. I'm very, very well.
That's good.
Yes, it's good. It's good. I noticed a little bit of something different.
What is it?
Your glasses.
Yes, I have glasses now.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that about a year ago, I should have probably gotten this checked out a year ago, but I noticed a year ago that when I was driving, my eyes would actually start hurting.
Oh, the actual balls of
Yeah,
the
the
eyes?
balls of my eyes, yeah. And then I'm like, this isn't right. This isn't right. And then I noticed as time went on that especially as I was driving, that's where I would notice it the most, I would start to have to like focus.
Oh, yeah.
Overly focus. So I'm like, okay, this is not right. And then as I started noticing it happen when I was looking at my phone, I was like, okay, I need to do something about this.
I need to do this.
Yes, I need to go get my eyes checked.
Isn't it funny when the eyes go like a little bit fuzzy and you realize like you go from like having really, really good vision to being like, why am I straining all the time?
Yes, I'm straining all the time and getting consistent headaches.
Yeah.
So here I am with my glasses.
I love that.
I have
for you.
glasses.
They suit you really well. It feels like you've always had them.
To be honest, when I first wore them, I hated them. And I'm like, great, now I look like I'm 50 years old.
Now, I've told you before, you don't look like you're 50. You look like a little bit of a porn star.
What are you talking about? What a disgraceful thing to say.
You just look like it actually makes you quite sexy. I think you look sexy.
You think I look sexy?
Yes, sexy.
Sexy?
We
Do
say
I
that
ooze
too much
sex
on it.
appeal?
Yes, just like Kevin Bacon, you do ooze sex appeal.
Oh my lord, Elle, thank you. You've never said that I was sexy before.
I don't usually use that word, to be honest. It's usually you that uses that word. But
I love using the word sexy.
yeah. See, you know when you're in high school and everyone used to say hot and sexy all the time and like
yeah.
they'd comment on a photo be like hot, sexy.
Yeah.
I always got cute and I remember feeling like that was such an insult. Like I'm like, why can I not be hot? Why can I not be
degrading.
sexy?
Oh, so cute.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, nah, I think people just thought I was cute because, come on.
Oh, I thought you would say to other people, oh, you're so cute.
No, people would say it to me and I would never get the sexy or hot comment.
Oh,
or
neither
like,
did I.
Yeah. Or like if boys would talk to me, they'd be like, oh, you're so cute, Elle. And I'd be like,
I'd get your eyes are big. Okay.
like guys, you have really big eyes.
Really big eyes. Okay.
That's not my eyes you're looking at.
Oh, what is it? What are you looking at?
I was quoting Will and Grace. You know when Karen's like, she's like, that's not my soul you're looking at. He's like, you have a beautiful soul.
Oh my god, I thought you were referring to my breasts.
That's what I was meaning, but from the Karen episode.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Okay, glad we got through that confusion.
I do love the glasses. I think they look really, really
Thank you, I
snazzy.
appreciate that.
I meant to wear my glasses a lot more than I do, but I never wear them.
Why is that?
They annoy my face.
In what way? As in
I
they
just feel
feel
like
heavy on the face?
Yeah, and I've tried all the different types of glasses. Like I've tried the ones with the little rubbery things. They are frustrating.
No, I don't like those.
And then I've tried the ones you're wearing now where they're a bit more bigger framed. And I do like wearing them, like occasionally, but I'll wear them when I need to. Like I'll wear them when I drive at nighttime and I'll wear them when I use a computer for a lot of the time. But after I quit full-time work and I wasn't using 3 screens at once all the time, I've like sort of dropped it off. But I do need to go to the optometrist. I keep getting those alerts. Like,
Yes.
check me
Check me. See, I have to wear them full time. I'm not going to go to the point where I need contact lenses to wear them to go out or something if I don't want to wear my glasses.
Yeah.
Because it's actually not my eye that's the problem. It's the muscles around my eye.
Yeah.
Apparently, it's a very common thing to happen to people now because we all use so much technology. And the problem is that your eyes are meant to be facing forward, right? But because we're constantly looking at our phones or at a laptop, at screens, our eyesight goes in. It's like a diagonal. It's like tunnel vision.
Inward, yeah.
That's right. So it creates the muscles around the eye to be extremely fatigued. And that is what's causing me for my vision to not be in focus. So my muscles around my eye are overly fatigued.
I can believe that. I feel like I feel that feeling a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think that's why my eyes hurt so much.
Yeah, I was getting a lot of eye pain when I used to use like a lot of screens. And you edit a lot more than me, so like you're always like
I'm always on the laptop or on my phone.
Yeah.
Right? So they said full time for about 12 months, and then they said hopefully that by the end of that 12 months, I'm going to notice that I don't need to really wear my glasses anymore.
That's really good.
So I'm looking forward to that.
I'm looking for that too, because I know that everyone has that kind of like, there's that like, not a rumor, but it's like a little fib, I think, where people like, once you wear glasses, you're going to always have to rely on those glasses. And I don't think that's necessarily true.
No.
But I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see. I remember I was having eye pain as well quite a bit, and I've gone to ophthalmologist a few times as well. But I remember I went and they had to check behind my eye, and they gave me these little eye drops.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was okay. And she was like, I was in a shopping center, like at the original check, and she was like, okay, like I'm going to put these eye drops in to dilate your eye, or what's that word when they go big?
Dilate?
Yeah, dilate your eye. And she's like, you can just go for a walk around the shopping center for like 5-10 minutes. And once you notice them sort of kicking in, like your eyes will start to feel a little bit blurry, kind of.
Right.
Like, then come back. I'm like, okay. I'm like, surely I have to.
Yeah, but how did she expect you to walk back?
Yeah, I think she expected me to walk back like as soon as I noticed something different. But I decided to go to my favorite Kransky place that was in that shopping center.
Yeah.
Which is no longer there anymore. I can talk about that at another time. It really hurt my soul. But so I was like, okay, I have time for a Kransky. Like, that would be fun. So I went and got my Kransky, and I remember taking a bite of it, looking at my Kransky, taking a bite of it, and then looking up and not being able to see. Like, suddenly it just hit all at once, and I was like, ooh. Like, it must have been kicking in early, and I was just getting distracted
by this.
by
Were you with someone?
No, I was by myself.
Oh my God.
So I was like, hey, and everything was just a blur, and I'm like I could only feel the Kransky. I was like still trying to eat it, and luckily I was sitting down at the time, so I was like, okay, that's not too bad. But I was on it was like a little bar bench that you're sitting on, so I had to try and maneuver down the stool, and then find my way back to the optometrist, and I looked like a little blind mice. I was like so slow, step by step, and I want to say this hasn't happened again, but it has.
You didn't learn the first time.
I didn't learn the first time.
Yeah,
and then I needed someone to come pick me up. I shouldn't have drove that day.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was not fun. My butt is clenching like I need to take a dump right this instant.
Why?
I don't know.
You can't control it?
I have no I always wait till the last minute.
And you say I'm the one that brings up the shit all the time.
I know.
And you say it's me. Well, I've learnt my lesson. I'll just wait until you learn yours.
I know. It's going to hit me at the Jerry Seinfeld concert this year. But yeah, so I was like a little blind mice walking back to the thing. Finally got there. Turns out there was a bit of swelling behind my eye, but it was all right.
I was in your butt.
No. Probably there too, bloody hemorrhoids. Oh.
You're revealing a lot about yourself.
I know, in such small doses. I like Kranskys. Cheese Kranskys only.
Yes, and hemorrhoids.
And I probably get them because of the crappy foods I eat and the strain I must go through.
Oh my God.
Right. Where did I go here? I don't know. I'm sorry for the over-explaining and oversharing, which I'm also going to be sorry for the oversharing I did throughout this episode.
Oh my God. Speaking of throughout the episode, shall we talk about our guest today?
Oh, can we please? I'm so excited.
Our guest name is Steph, and she's a clinical psychologist. She has an online presence at the name of MIND FOOD STEPH.
She talks a lot about mental health disorders, specifically ADHD quite a bit, and I notice a few BPD and bipolar content as well. But she talks a lot around eating disorders and binge eating, which I find very, very interesting. And binge eating can be very linked to ADHD. So having both is I really enjoy her content.
She really opened my eyes to who I am. But she's extremely helpful. For someone who is not my psychologist.
Yes.
She really, she could see me.
Yeah.
She could really see me.
I know.
I felt like.
I felt that way too.
Yeah.
I found that throughout this chat, and you guys will get to hear it in a moment, but throughout this chat, she really just brings so much light and energy, and it's exactly how you want psychologists to be when you're looking for a psychologist. There's some people that will be very clinical about it and have a very clinical approach, and we've interviewed people like that before as well, and that's great in its own way. But her energy and the way she is excited to learn about the things as she goes, the way that she's excited to help someone through something and provide that information through her content as well in such a loving and caring way, and a way that easy to digest. It's not difficult to digest.
So easy.
Yeah.
So easy.
She really does break it down for you.
Yeah. But for now, let's get to the episode. We'll be right back with Steph.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here with Elle times 2.
We've got the heater on because we're freezing and we're in Melbourne at the moment. So
Yes.
I was going to say, you two are in your hoodies and
Yes.
I know, like,
all rugged up.
Summer is in 2 weeks and we're in hoodies.
although 2 days ago I was like sweating.
Melting.
Yeah, melting. But that's,
2 days
that's
ago,
Melbourne
we're in
for you.
shorts. Now we're in hoodies.
I was in shorts. I've missed my
Good
shorts.
old Melbourne.
Good old Melbourne. Unpredictable. Okay, Steph, so we would love to know what brought you to this career choice.
Yeah, like a little bit about you.
Yeah.
And why you chose this field of
yeah.
psychology as well.
I was very certain in high school. I had a psychology teacher I really liked. And when I was learning the subject, I thought, wow, I want to be a clinical psychologist. That's my dream. I want to help people. That's what I wanted to do. So I enjoyed the subject in high school, but more so than that, I went through my own eating disorder struggle. And back then it was very secret. No one spoke about it. Dieting was very mainstream. It was very normal. I mean, you're both Greek. You must know what it's like growing up in a Greek growing up in a Greek household. It is all about food, but also my mum was chronically dieting and buying, low fat, low sugar. And this was when everyone on the Today Show was like, this new diet and, this new low fat. And it was so normalized. So I grew up just thinking, oh, losing weight is a hobby that everybody should be doing.
If I think back to my childhood, my mum was always like, oh, I'm trying to lose weight. I don't think she ever not said that in my entire life.
Yeah, same here actually. Good point.
Yeah. And I think many people listening to this will think about it and relate because it was so normal back then. It was so common. But it influences how you think and your perception of the world and what you think you need to do with your own body. So, yeah, I went on this journey, thought I needed to lose weight. And then obviously any type of restraint leads to binge eating. And then I just went on this massive binge eating disorder, bulimia. And because it was never that bad, I never really thought it was a problem. I called it seasonal eating disorder. I just thought it would come and go. But then it progressively got worse as it does. And I thought to myself, I need to fix this. How am I going to be a psychologist when I'm the one who needs therapy? So yeah, I did. I recovered and I thought I need to help people with this. And that's why I got into this line of work.
Was there a moment that sticks out to you now that helped you jerried on that you need to change your behavior?
Yes. So I used to have a pole dancing studio for fitness.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, back in Melbourne. So while I was studying full time, I was working as a receptionist in a popular pole dancing studio in Melbourne, and I ended up buying a franchise and running it. I loved business. I loved women's fitness. I loved all that. And when you're going through an eating disorder, it's a very disconnected experience. You're not fully present. I remember my mum, I'd wake up in the morning and I'd be so tired because you get this hangover. Like trigger warning, we're going to be talking about graphic information. So just anyone listening to this who may want to pause or take a breath, I'll be getting a bit graphic. So that's okay. So with bulimia, that's obviously an eating disorder where you have episodes of binge eating and then you overcompensate. So you may force yourself to purge, vomit, take laxatives, etc. So for me, it was purging, and going through that, it's almost like waking up with a hangover. You're so tired. Your electrolytes are everywhere. You feel crap. And I remember my mom saying to me, like, what's wrong? What's wrong? The spark has gone from your eyes. And she she didn't know. And I'm just tired. I'm just tired. And I was running the pole studio. And then one day I was driving home from work. Now I used to teach 6 hours a day. I teach 3 classes in the morning and I teach 3 classes in the evening, and the last class would finish at 9:30. And I was driving home and I see something from the corner of my eye in the car next to me. And I'm like, oh, it's just a guy trying to get my attention or something like that. So I didn't look. And then this guy's like waving and I was like, what? And he's like, you're on the wrong side of the road.
Get the fuck
And
out.
I was like, what? And I look forward and there's like 4 rows of cars coming towards me. And I was like, oh, crap. So I just moved and it was fine. I was fine. I was safe. But you're so out of it and you're so tired and you're so disconnected that you stop caring. You stop caring about everything. All you care about is food. All you care about is your body. All you care about is, what am I going to eat? What's my next meal? I need to get rid of these calories. Like, you are not living in your body, in your life. And that was the moment I'm like, now it's impacting your day-to-day functioning. Like, you are not present. You could have really hurt yourself. Something bad could have happened. You're putting other people at risk.
Of course.
You need help. And it's okay. As a psychology student, it's okay to see a psychologist. I think I just had a lot of shame back then, and mental health had a lot of stigma. But now everyone, all psychology, students, a lot of them see psychologists. Everyone has one, and I love that it's so normalized. But back then it was very secretive.
Yeah, I feel like there is that kind of stigma around, like, if you're teaching someone how to like deal with their own emotions, you should have yours sorted. And like, that is just that it's like takes away from that psychologist being human as well. And it's a bit like, we have to remember that everyone, including the people that are professionals in that industry, still struggle. And it's not even a struggle, it's just living. Like, that's just life.
Yes. And I think, look, to be honest with you, and this may be a bit controversial, I think there's a fine line. I did a video on TikTok that got a lot of interesting comments. It got a lot of hate. People reported it. It created quite the stir, because in the video I think I talk about confessions of a psychologist, or things you need to know. And one of the things I said is, if you have unresolved mental health issues, you shouldn't be practicing if it's impairing your judgment. And people were losing it, saying, oh, what? Because I have depression, I can't be a psychologist? Or so what? My dreams are crushed, I can't do it. But it's actually in the code of ethics. So in the code of ethics, there's a part that says, if you are these aren't the exact words, but essentially, if something is impairing your practice, your judgment, your objectivity, you should not be practicing. And that is responsible. And when I got reported and all that, they dropped it. But the complaint, I backed myself and I said, no, it's true. If you have an issue that you're not resolving, that you're not working on, that's impacting your ability to work with clients, you shouldn't be practicing.
No, I agree.
I agree with that. I know that even from studying counselling, like, it's especially, and the fact in what you're saying is, like, because it's impairing with the actual work. It's not that you can't feel that way. It's the fact that if you're unable to like work with that client, and you're going to have a biased opinion, or it's going to impact that's like, it should be kind of a no-brainer that you don't want to, you're affecting someone else's entire life with what you're saying, essentially, as well, in that conversation.
Exactly. And people are paying for that. And I think it's responsible to say, hey, I'm probably not in the best place to be working with people. I think that is good self-awareness.
I agree.
Most definitely. I can't believe you got so much hate for
that. I wouldn't expect reporting for that, because I don't think that's what you were saying either. It wasn't like you were saying, if I have depression, I can't do this. It's like
30-second videos, 60-second videos that are going out to a vulnerable audience are going to be misinterpreted, and they're going to be taken in the wrong way. So you just got to be a bit mindful of that.
No, I totally understand that. I think even with us, like, luckily we just talk about music and we're like, but I know when I was posting a lot of coaching content, I'm very careful with what I post, because I'm like, I just can't be bothered dealing with anything. But I have other coaches that they'll post their opinion on something, and then it's just like completely attacked. And it's hard to share your professional opinion online with a bunch of people that are in that vulnerable state. Or even if you're not a professional opinion, like, I've got obsessive compulsive disorder and ADHD, and I find in a lot of support groups for OCD, I find it a really horrible place to get support from, because it's just people triggering each other, and you just can't even talk about your own thing going on without someone sort of attacking you for like you just expressing your thought. So I actually think that, as much as I love social media and I think there's so much good that comes from it, there's a lot of attacking that goes on that doesn't need to be had.
I know. Yeah. And I think 100%. I didn't know you had OCD. Well, we just met, but
yes.
That's very interesting, because I get asked a lot about it. Is it linked with ADHD? Is there a high comorbidity? So it's interesting you brought that up. We can definitely
Ooh,
touch on that if you like.
I would love that, because I literally found it so. Yeah, we can talk about it quickly now. But
before we forget.
Yes, before we forget, because I will. No, I've been diagnosed with OCD since I was 16. Dad has it as well. I'm pretty certain both my parents also have ADHD, but I've only been diagnosed with ADHD the last year and a half. And at first I thought that all my symptoms had to do with OCD, and then when I was doing the ADHD quizzes online, I'm like, oh, I'm only getting high scores because like there's an overlap. But then I can now, seeing both of them, I can see what is my OCD and what is my ADHD very clearly now. But in terms of like how they like from your perspective, how they coordinate together, like is there actually a correlation between both? Like,
I think so. We know that ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition or disorder. So it's a brain-based one, which means people struggle with their memory, forgetfulness, organization, processing speed, planning. So that part of the brain, the CEO part of the brain, that's your higher order thinking, is just wired differently to people who don't have ADHD. And unlike, say, OCD or depression, it doesn't go away. It's there. It's like an eyesight condition. You need glasses, you need particular things to help manage it. Whereas OCD comes from a different category. It's not neurodevelopmental, it's not brain, but it is psychological. So it comes from the obsessive and compulsive related category in the diagnostic manual. And it's characterized by having intrusive thoughts and which are called obsessions, and then compulsive behaviors or rituals that are aimed to neutralize the anxiety that those thoughts cause. But they are similar because they both have a lot of anxiety. So having ADHD causes anxiety, being late to appointments, forgetting things, being told there's something wrong with you, wondering why you can't do basic life things. And perhaps that would make you more vulnerable to OCD tendencies, like being super obsessed with your calendar, making sure you're not late, doing certain things because you might be trying to prevent bad things happening or prevent that. That's my guess. But also ADHD is more external, whereas OCD is very internal. So ADHD is a lot about how people relate to their environment, whereas OCD is, I'm going to deal with my anxiety by turning it kind of inward. And it is believed that they do share a genetic link, and there's a lot of genetic vulnerability. I'm not sure if it's in your family, but yes, there is a lot of overlap, and 80% of people who have ADHD will have something else, OCD, depression, anxiety. It doesn't just come on its own, very rarely.
Yeah, I've learned that as well. Like, I feel like since I've gotten the ADHD diagnosis, I've realized I have dyslexia as well, and like, I suffer with binge eating as well, and I'm like, it's everything. Like, that's a question I had for you. Like, for people like me, where I'm getting a bunch of, I don't mind the diagnosis. Like, I like living with letters. Like, that's how I like to call it. So I'm like, I enjoy it. I like knowing that from so much of my childhood, I felt like I was different. So at least now I have a reasoning, and it kind of gives me a bit of closure. But there are moments where it becomes very difficult to differentiate what is a me thing and what is my disorder thing. Like, what is actually my personality, and what is why does it feel like everything I do is just my disorder? How would you suggest someone could navigate through that kind of feeling?
It's like asking what is the meaning of life.
I know, it feels that way. That's like my everyday question before I go to sleep. I'm like, oh my God, but that's just my OCD. I'm like, oh, but that's just the ADHD. Oh, but that's probably because of the binge eating. And then I'm like, oh, like everything is like.
I know, it's exhausting. Yeah. It's exhausting. And I think, look, I agree. I think labels are good. I think that's another thing I get some, comments on is stop labeling people. You shouldn't diagnose. It's not real. But it comes down to your perception of a label and a diagnosis. You wouldn't say to someone who goes to the doctor, oh my God, they diagnosed me with a broken leg. Oh, that diagnosis is bad. You shouldn't. Diagnosis informs treatment. And for many people, exactly what you said, Elle, healing, the treatment is in the diagnosis, is being told, hey, you're not just crazy, you're not just weird, you're not whatever.
Yeah.
You actually have something that explains this. So I think you're spot on with that.
Yeah.
Now, the second part of your question, what is me? What is my OCD? I think it's important to sort of realize your personality develops or solidifies when you're about 18 years old. What you like, what you enjoy. Your personality forms earlier, but when we speak about personality disorders, you can't really diagnose someone before 18. And I think it's important to know that, look, symptoms of ADHD will always be present. They'll always impact you, but it doesn't really determine who you are and what you like and the person that you're becoming. I think it's a challenging question. How do you differentiate what's you and what's your...
I speak to my psychiatrist and I have my psychiatrist and my psychologist. I'm like all backed up with my people, but and my life coach and my ADHD coach. I have like everything, but I feel like I've come to terms with the fact that like all of it is who I am. Like it's all part of me. It's not, I can label it as the disorder and that helps me in that, what we just discussed kind of way. But in terms of when I do question that kind of part of myself before I go to sleep at night, I remind myself like all of that is part of me and I love those parts of me, even though there's parts that can be a bit frustrating sometimes and they could be related to that disorder. It's still at the end of the day like who I am. And reminding myself I'm not separate from the disorder to some extent, like and I don't have to be against it either. Like it is, like I can just embrace it as like, well, that's just part of my personality and I can love that part of my personality, or I can be like, oh, I can try work on that part of my personality. So I just try and remind myself that it doesn't have to be like this thing that
you don't have to figure it out.
Yeah, I don't have to try put myself under a certain hat, for example. Like maybe it can all be a big hat.
Maybe a way to look at it as well is you wouldn't be who you are today if it wasn't for these things.
That's how I like to look at all things that have happened in life, because I'm like, oh yeah, my parents divorced. I guess I wouldn't be like this if it wasn't for that. Like I have to find some positive in that situation. But I do feel like that does help, because I like the person that I am I've liked the person that I am for years now, regardless of all the situations I've gone through. So, I think for me, and because I feel that way about myself, it's made it a lot easier to accept that the disorders are not something I need to feel like pull me in so many different directions, I guess.
Yeah, and two things. Yeah. It's so funny because that's probably the OCD part of you that's like, you need to figure this out. Yes. You need to separate it and understand it. And then, so I think you said a really good thing, and it's parts. We all have parts, and a lot of schema therapy looks at parts work. So what happens is throughout our life, depending on what we experience, our personality forms parts, right? I know I have a part that is a 14-year-old defensive girl in me, and this is the girl that went through the eating disorder, that was self-conscious, that was like, leave me alone, and every now and then she'll get triggered. Yeah, when I feel like I'm being like attacked or someone's questioning me, she might come up. But I've learned to recognize that part and manage that part. And I know that that part serves a function. So we all have different parts of ourselves that serve a function, but we need to learn to recognize the different parts and what those parts need. So there may be days where your OCD part is more activated, and what does that part of me need today to feel good? And how can all these parts work together rather than against one another?
I think that was perfectly, like you've articulated that perfectly for my brain just now. My OCD is very happy that it has an answer. But that's so true. That's really true, because there are certain days where I do, like the other day, I did recognize like, oh, okay, the OCD is a little bit more fiery today. I'm going to focus on that and like try calm myself in that way. But then today, for example, forgot to take my medication in the morning. I'm like, okay, let's get back to focus today. It's all about parts.
I have a quick question as well about ADHD. To be honest, it's not something that I truly thought about for myself for many, many years. And I wasn't educated in it as well. After Elle got her diagnosis and we started talking about it a lot, I noticed that since I had my child, a lot of different things have become, I don't want to say popped up because they've always kind of been there, but they've become noticeably stronger. And I just wanted to ask you, is that, I don't want to say normal, but can that happen once you've had a child?
All the time.
That's something I've been struggling with, because it's like I'm discovering this whole new side of myself since having him. And it's kind of been a really wild roller coaster as well, because I also had postpartum depression on top of that. Having a child, can it bring out things that you didn't know were there?
100%. And this is what happened over the pandemic, over COVID, is so many new mums and people who had kids really realized for the first time how much they struggle with day-to-day tasks that other people find easy. Because when you have a kid, and if you have undiagnosed ADHD, it becomes so clear how hard life feels and how different things feel. And parenting with ADHD, if you don't know you have it, even if you know you have it, is extremely overwhelming. You feel like you don't have the skills or something's wrong, and keeping up with kids' schedules and doing all that mum stuff. But I think the pandemic brought that to the light even more, because you were at home. The basic things felt super hard. But yes, many, many, many mums, so many have messaged me that realized they have ADHD or they're seeking an assessment after they have kids, because one, they're not able to mask anymore because the stress outweighs the coping or masking. And then secondly, they may see symptoms in their child. They get their child assessed, and then they realize they have it because there's a really high genetic component.
Right.
Very high, yeah.
Yeah. How did you know? Like, what was it about being a mum that led you down this path?
What you said before, it's the overwhelming anxiety that I would feel over daily tasks. I also got really bad anxiety over the simplest things that my son would do. And also on top of that, I am so extremely disorganized, and I feel like that disorganization is affecting my parenting life, because I feel like I'm jumbling not only like appointments and trying to keep up and trying to make sure everything's going right, but actual material things. I feel like I have become a major slob. Like, I am struggling with keeping things organized. I like to call all the drawers in my kitchen and my bathrooms organized chaos, because I know where everything is, but to a different eye, it's a complete mess. I don't know. It's just been a lot of things that just have kind of built up together. And then after discussing it along with Elle, kind of helped me put two and two together, what is maybe happening.
Yeah, wow. And it's so hard not to be hard on yourself.
Yes.
You know, because a lot of mums who go through this will start to question, like, am I meeting my child's needs? Am I, you know, looking after them enough? Am I doing all that? And I think earlier you mentioned postnatal depression, and many mums with ADHD experience it. But the problem is that they'll often get treated for depression, or they'll get diagnosed with it when it could be ADHD.
I feel like that is something that I am potentially going through, because my son's 3.5. I'm still dealing with postnatal depression, and I've been on antidepressants and everything like that, but I feel like nothing is really hitting the mark for me. So that's a very
Are you on ADHD? Are you on ADHD meds?
No, I have not been diagnosed.
Oh, but you think it could be?
No, yes.
Okay, but you haven't had an assessment?
No.
Right, okay. I thought you did. Right.
No.
It's super interesting because people will say to me, how do I know if it's depression? How do I know if it's anxiety? Look, to be diagnosed with ADHD, obviously you have to do a full assessment, and a psychologist or a psychiatrist can do that. But a psychiatrist has to be the one to prescribe medication. So you do need to end up seeing them. I believe it's when you've done all the things. You've been on the antidepressants, you've done the meditation, you've done the journaling, you've done the walking, you eat reasonably well. You've done everything, but you feel like there's this persistent piece of the puzzle that's missing, and you can usually track it back. So you need to have had symptoms before the age of 12, which makes diagnosing ADHD in adults very hard and complicated, because a lot of people don't remember that far back. Women in particular are perfectionistic in school, so they're not that kid jumping up and down. They stay at the back. They sort of shut down. They're like the good girl in class. Without diagnosing or, you know, providing any psychological advice, I think for many people, if you've been treated for anxiety and depression and you are doing all the things and you're trying to manage it, but forgetfulness, disorganization, struggling to remember things, being late to appointments, feeling chaotic, always having, ruminative thoughts that are persistent, that's when it could be indicative of ADHD, whereas anxiety goes up and down, it flares up, it has moments, whereas, the concentration and the executive functioning doesn't stop.
I could agree with that. When I got my actual diagnosis for ADHD, I sorted out because I literally tried the meditation. I was working with coaches, psychologists and I was like, okay, it must all be the OCD. But it was the fact that I was doing everything I could possibly do, and my OCD symptoms were at a place where they were manageable, where I was like, why am I still feeling like this? Why can I still not have any energy to like leave the bed in the morning or do anything with my day? And it that's what's made me seek out the actual diagnosis and realize like, okay, this is something completely different, because it really does, the executive dysfunction does not stop, in my opinion.
It doesn't stop, and you just learn to manage it and deal with it. And even just like those negative thoughts, like, why are you like this? Why are you so chaotic? Why are you so disorganized? Whereas we see in anxiety, it's usually the opposite. People are like hyper overcompensating, and they can do that in OCD, and they can be that in ADHD because they're trying to overcompensate. But I think, how long can you sort of track back this behavior? Like, is there anything earlier that you can think of, Elle?
I mean, I think the disorganization has always been present, but I feel like that's gotten worse because I feel like my time management has maybe gotten worse, because I obviously have to take care of another human. You know what I mean? I have to make sure he's fed and he's sleeping, he's bathed, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So I feel like those two things have gotten worse. I am known as the one in my family Elle's always late. So that's always been something I've dealt with as well. To be honest, I feel like it's hard to talk about pre-12.
I know.
One thing is, like, since I've had a baby, I feel like my memory has kind of gotten a bit worse as well. But also, because I don't really have a relationship with one of my parents, I can't really ask. And if I ask my dad, I'm like, hey, Dad, do you remember this? He'll be like, nah, you're great. Like, that's usually his answer to everything. So it's hard. It's hard to think that far back.
That's one thing I guess I don't really agree with in the industry, and I think it will probably change, is sometimes people with ADHD do have parents who are narcissistic, who won't give them their reports, or who say, no, you're fine, don't be ridiculous, you're always blaming me, bad parenting. And I've had people who a psychiatrist won't diagnose them because they can't get access to their reports, or the parent won't do an assessment. And I think there needs to be options for those people, because it's like, oh, just because I can't get data from before you're 12, let's just not diagnose you. So I think that can be problematic. But there are ways around it. If you can't get access to that, you're not going to be denied support. But I want you to know that it's really common for mothers to discover they have ADHD that wasn't picked up when they were children. And like we said, it presents differently in genders. Women have a lot of the inattentive subtypes. So there's 3 subtypes: hyperactive, impulsive, inattentive, and combined. And these types of women have chronic disorganization. They feel they're underachieving, but they're not disruptive as we would expect.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. You also answered my next question of like male and female things. So that was nice.
Yeah. And I think, just to add on that, so we use a book called the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Conditions. And in there, the diagnostic criteria, it's very brain-based. And also it does, and what I don't like about the DSM, which maybe it might change in future years, it's still very, very new, we're only in the 5th edition, text revised, is it lumps child and adult under one diagnosis. So, for example, the ADHD criteria is for adults and children and whatever, that's fine. But the criteria does look like it fits a hyperactive male. Why? Because emotional symptoms of ADHD are difficult to quantify. You can't exactly say, emotional dysregulation. Like, how do you it's hard to quantify that as a symptom for a brain condition. That's my understanding of it. But yeah, things like emotion dysregulation, men may handle it different to, say, women. And this is why women may get diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, because of the mood swings. With the hyperactive inattentive subtype, for women, it's a lot of mental racing, mental chatter, interrupting, difficulty switching off, speaking over people, that sort of thing. Whereas males may be more physically hyperactive and maybe more risk-taking. And there are women who may have that too, but yeah, I think this is the reason it can get missed, especially in women. But we're learning, we're doing better.
I think so too. I feel like I was going to ask that question because I find that I have a lot of after I've gotten diagnosed, I've realized a lot of my friends from high school, that because I didn't have a lot of friends in high school, but like the few friends that I did connect with all have now also been diagnosed with ADHD, which has been very fun for us. But I've noticed that my male friends with ADHD, I have a lot more characteristics in common with them than I do with the females that have ADHD. And I always wondered, like, why? Like, why am I, like, I definitely do have a lot of the characteristics of a female, especially when I was a child. But as I've become an adult, I'm very much more the impulsive, spontaneous, scatterbrained, but also like very aggressive ADHD version. Understanding, I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize, like emotional dysregulation is part of the ADHD, and they think it's just like being disorganized and forgetful and stuff like that. But like, I find that the emotional dysregulation is actually what made it so difficult for me to get diagnosis, because I didn't realize that that was even part of this. So it's really, I feel like, yeah, I wish that was higher, like more of a priority in the criteria sometimes.
Yeah, of course. And don't forget, imagine this. Imagine living a life where you're told, you've got to be on time. If only you did this, if only you applied yourself. Why can't you just be like everyone else? Shush, be quiet, don't talk. And you don't know how to control that as a child. So when you don't know how to control it, you're going to internalize these messages and think there's something wrong with me. I'm not good enough. Why can't I sit still? And that's going to cause emotional issues. That's going to cause you to feel not good enough, self-esteem, depression, anxiety, all of that. And many people with ADHD, not everyone, but having an upbringing that was potentially traumatic, or, small traumas or big traumas, whatever it is, or growing up with parents who didn't teach you how to regulate your emotions, is very common as well. So you don't know how to control your emotions. You're just told to be quiet. You're just told to stop jumping on the furniture. And unless you get help, who teaches you how to breathe? Who teaches you how to regulate your nervous system? So that's why we see a lot of people with ADHD turn to binge eating or smoking, substances, addictions, and all that, because they are just trying to self-soothe or self-medicate.
Interesting on the topic of binge eating, because we've had a few people ask questions around binge eating as well, and myself, I only found out recently that I suffer from binge eating. Besides the ADHD, obviously with ADHD, but also without ADHD, when it comes to binge eating, like what usually brings that on? What kind of is why would you say that binge eating occurs, that is so fulfilling to the ADHD mind or to the other mind as well?
Yeah, so binge eating, let's define it. It's eating a large amount of food in a short period of time and feeling a loss of control. And you feel guilty, you feel stressed, you feel bad about it. And it's not an enjoyable experience. It's not like, oh, I had so much stuffed turkey on Christmas. Whoops, I'm full, but I feel really satisfied. It's distressing for people. And the reason it's linked is, going back to the pandemic, so many women discovered they have ADHD. So many people struggled with their relationship with food because we didn't have anything. We didn't have, especially in Melbourne, we were literally in jail for so long.
Gosh,
we couldn't even go for
literally.
a walk.
Yeah.
It was crazy. We couldn't do the things that make us feel good. We couldn't go to the gym. We couldn't, speak with friends without worrying we were breaking the law of going out of our radius. So many of us turn to food a little bit more than we would, or alcohol.
Explaining my life a lot right now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Binge eating is linked to ADHD, And I don't feel this link has enough awareness around it because psychologists aren't really trained. They're not trained in eating disorders, and they're not trained in assessing neurodiversity unless you specifically go out and do that training after you're qualified. So it's not well understood that you're really taught about depression, anxiety, all of this. And look, maybe it's changed, but back in my day, this is how it was. And people with ADHD, we know they have lower access to the neurotransmitters in your brain, dopamine, norepinephrine. So dopamine is what makes you feel good. It's what makes you feel a sense of reward and accomplishment. Whereas norepinephrine helps you get started on tasks. It helps you initiate things. That's why people with ADHD really struggle to get started on tasks, and they procrastinate because they don't have that access to dopamine or norepinephrine that neurotypicals have. So food is a really quick way to get that dopamine fix. So this is the first reason. Because of the neurotransmitters, I think a lot of people turn to food because it does give them that sense of feeling good, that dopamine, sugar, carbs, it's self-soothing. The second thing is we learn to self-soothe with food from a young age. Don't cry, have a lollipop. You know, when you go to the dentist when you're a kid, well done, you were such a good girl, have a lollipop. We're taught from a young age to associate food with reward, or to use food to avoid pain or to soothe pain. So we learn that from a young age. The third thing is people with ADHD often forget to eat. Mm-hmm. They forget their lunch. They forget.
Me, big time.
That is I'm the opposite of that. I'm constantly thinking about food.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly kind of hungry, and I'm constantly thinking I want to eat something.
Okay, that's interesting. And I guess, look, there's not a one size fits all. Everyone's different depending on what you've gone through, what you've experienced, etc. But for many, they forget to eat, and then by the time they're like, oh crap, I have to eat, they're starving, and then that can make you vulnerable to binge eating. And when you're starving, when you haven't eaten properly, your judgment's impaired. So you're like, I'll just eat a block of chocolate for dinner. That'll be fine.
That is me as well. I'll have like a chocolate lava cake, and that's like my exciting, like, I'll eat like 3 of them.
Yeah, exactly. So this is something we address in my program, because you really need food structure to help prevent binge eating. And the final thing is, having ADHD is stressful, especially if it's undiagnosed, and we deal with stress with food. Food is a socially acceptable, immediately available resource to us. It's much more appropriate than cocaine,
yes.
for example.
Yes, exactly.
And more affordable, but it's the thing that is so socially accepted. It's immediate. We get on a phone, and people with ADHD love Uber Eats.
Yeah, during the pandemic, I swear, I think I ended up having to delete the Uber Eats app from my phone after I quit full-time work, because I was still working in the office during the pandemic, and I think I spent thousands of dollars on Uber Eats that year.
It's so easy to. That's the problem. It's very easy.
And it was like, I would get to work, and my boss would come in at like 10:30, and he'd be like, Elle, are you eating a cheeseburger right now? I'm like, yes. Like, and it would happen like 3 times a week. And it was just because the way you described binge eating before is how I used to be before the pandemic. And then during the pandemic, it was like next level, like binging, like next level, where I would eat that in the morning, then not eat anything else throughout the rest of the day, and then eat again in the middle of the night. But like, it's never in a structured way. Yeah. Never.
Yep. It's sporadic. And don't forget, the pandemic caused a lot of uncertainty, a lot of stress, and a lot of dysregulation. So to try to get certainty, to try to self-soothe, we turn to food, exactly what you said. But then what happens is, we're not dealing with the root cause. We create a new problem, which is the binge eating. But we're not really going to get into the root cause of what's causing that, because what people don't realize, they come to me, they're like, I need to stop binge eating, help me with my binge eating. But their binge eating is serving a function, and it's meeting a need, and we have to figure out what that is.
As in a need in terms of like they're doing it because secretly it's giving them the need of like like for me, I think I worked out that it kind of met this need of connection, because like when I was younger, Dad used to, as like his way of like spending time with me and my sister, we'd go to Macca's together, or we'd go to Hungry Jack's together, or KFC. And like now, and I remember I started eating a lot when I was working full time, because I found it as a way to socialize with the people around me. So if I didn't know how to make conversation with them, because I'm neurodivergent, I don't know how to make conversation with people, I second guess myself. I'd be like, oh, do you want to get Red Rooster for lunch today? Let's get Red Rooster. And I would feel like this fulfillment as if I was bonding with that person because I ate food with them.
I love that.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
It is, and that's completely functional and okay, and that's fine. I think we've kind of gone too far the other way with diet culture. Don't emotionally eat. If you emotionally eat, you need to stop. Don't have this, don't have that. I'm of the opinion of it's fine to emotionally eat. It's fine to connect over food. But if it's getting to the point it's causing you distress, then let's talk about it. But you're exactly right. When we talk about meeting a need, we have primary needs that we need to get met. As a child, we need emotional affection. We need to feel safe. We need play, we need creativity, and we need to feel safe to express our emotions and feelings as children. And if those needs aren't getting adequately met in childhood, we will find other ways to meet those needs. So perhaps we throw tantrums as a child to get the parent to pay attention. But then what happens is we take these coping strategies into adulthood, and throwing a tantrum as an adult doesn't exactly work. And we're all dysregulated adults throwing tantrums if we don't deal with it. But yeah, when you think about needs, like, is it meeting a need of comfort? Is it meeting a need of connection? And the way you figure this out is when you're about to binge or you're craving to do that, asking yourself, what else am I feeling right now? What do I really need right now? Apart from these 5 quarter pounders, what am I actually feeling? What do I actually need? And then trying to build your self-awareness around it.
That's how I worked out that it was like that, because I asked myself that question. I was like, because I found that with my chocolate lava cake scenario, I was trying to stop myself from binging these chocolate lava cakes every night. And I was like, okay, I realized if I'm by myself, I can't eat them. Why can't I eat them when I'm by myself? Like if I spend if I had the whole night to myself, I wouldn't binge. But if I would binge, but not specifically on certain types of foods. And I noticed that certain type of food would be warm and like kind of bring me this feeling of love and intimacy to some extent. And I could only eat them in the presence of my family or like loved one. But if they weren't there, it's like I didn't have the desire to eat anymore. It was weirdly, I went through this whole like month of like really focusing on why I am eating what I'm eating. When I worked out it was binge eating, and I was like, okay, let me try to trace back what my body, my mind is telling me what my body is feeling and craving right now. And I noticed like, oh, I'm not feeling very fulfilled in my relationship right now, or I'm not feeling really like I'm getting the connection I need from my mum right now. And so when I was around those people, that's when I would suddenly have this urge of eating, like urge. Yeah.
That's so opposite, because normally people binge eat in secret or in private. And I think it just highlights that everyone has a different need and a different function. But first of all, chocolate lava cakes are delicious.
I know,
that's my
got a thing about
favorite
them.
thing in the
and
world.
I feel like we've said chocolate lava cakes so
Guys,
much.
I'm telling you, go to Red Rooster.
I'm like starting to drool.
This is why I keep saying Red Rooster. Red Rooster have these chocolate lava cakes that really got me hooked, and I can't undo them.
I'm going red because I want a chocolate
when
lava
you said
cake.
Red Rooster, that unlocked a memory. I don't think I've had Red Rooster in years.
Oh my
but my mum used to take us
A
and we used to
rooster
get it
roll.
as children.
Cheesy nuggets, man.
Yeah, the rooster roll with the mayo and the chicken.
Enough food talk.
Yeah, remember when I said I can't stop thinking about
hungry.
food? It's I can't stop.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. In regards to like the binge eating and stuff like that, that was another question I was going to have you, because I have noticed that that's something, like when I watch your videos, some of the examples of why you might, like how you might notice you have binge eating is like that secrecy or the need to kind of like that guilt, which I definitely feel the guilt when I eat, but the secrecy isn't there. Now I was going to ask you that question because I have a younger sister where the secrecy is very much there, where she's 10 and she'll hide food under her bed, and I can sneak her food in the middle of the night. So where for me, I've never felt the need to do that. And I was going to ask you, do you think that's because no one, like I've never fluctuated too much with my body weight before as a child, or like as an adult, even I feel like I'm 12 right now. But and I was thinking, like, psychologically, am I not doing it in secret because I've never had to, because everyone my whole life has told me you need to eat more because I've been presumed to be underweight? Like, do you think that could be that? Like,
it could be the messaging you've received is different. And remember, what people around us tell us form the story in our mind. So people like, you need to eat more, and eating's been normalized and it's okay to eat, and we connect over eating. Then your messaging around that is going to be very different to someone who say, oh, should you be eating that? You know, that's got a lot of sugar in it. Their messaging is going to be very different, and your thoughts and your beliefs affect your behavior. So that's going to lead their behavior to be very different.
Very interesting. I feel like, there's so many ways. I think that's one thing with, like with all of these disorders we're talking about today, like there's obviously like the way that most people will experience it, but it doesn't mean that like for anyone that's listening, just because you're not experiencing every single thing I'm saying or Elle's saying or you're saying, like, doesn't mean that you might not be still experiencing it. There's so many different ways there's so many different ways that you can relate to ADHD without having it exactly the same way I have it, for example.
Yeah, there can be so many different combinations, but as long as you're meeting a number of the criteria, it's impacting your life, it's not better explained by another mental health condition. That's basically what it is. But with binge eating, it's when it's negatively impacting your life, it's occurring on a regular basis, and it's causing clinically significant distress.
I actually saw one of your reels that really spoke to me, actually. You were talking about bikinis, and you were saying, like, when I was 18 and trying to pick a bikini, it was like, oh, I don't know, I don't like how this looks. And then even when you're in your 20s, you're like, yeah, I don't know. But then when you're in your 30s, you're like, fuck this, I just look good in this bikini, woo! And my question was, because I'm still very much in the 18 to 20 range of that reel where it was like, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. How can we, because I know many people feel this way, how can we get to that mind frame? Or is it...
I love this question.
Is it simply just a matter of maturity?
Yeah, I love this question. So it's a couple of things, right? The first one is, we do live in a society that does body shame. We do live in a society where it is hard to be in a larger body. I'm not going to deny that. We do live in a society where people are fat phobic. So I'm not going to be like, don't care, like just whatever, blah, blah. It's okay to care, and it's okay to be self-conscious. And the point is, you can feel those things, but you can still have the courage to do the things that are hard, even though you're scared. You know, I think so many people are like, you got to stop caring what people think. Of course we're going to care what people think. Care what people think, but be willing to do it anyway, because people are going to say stuff. People are going to think negative things. But are you going to put your life on hold because of that, because of them, because of what you're worried about? And I think it really is about mindset. It's about saying, what's the worst that can happen? If I wear this bikini, if I wear these bathers, yes, I might feel a bit uncomfortable for 5-10 minutes, but what's the worst that can happen? So for you, what are you so afraid of, Elle, if you were to wear that bikini?
That is a very good question. I think sometimes it's more how I feel about myself. I think I've set expectations in my head on what I would love to look like. And especially the last few years since I've had my child, I, don't look how I did before I had him. So I think it's more the expectation to look how I did. And so it's more of an inner battle. I don't necessarily think to myself, oh, I'm worried about what my husband thinks, or I'm worried about what people think. I think it's more inner demons.
So the only person holding you back is you.
100%.
Yeah. And you just got to question yourself, right? So why do you have this expectation? Why is it important that your body needs to be the way you think it needs to be? What is that going to give you or get you that you can't have now?
See, that is a question I really struggle to answer. I don't know what it would give me. I just feel like what comes with it, I like the idea of. Like the thought of not having a mental breakdown every time I have to get changed for something. Like that's the kind of stuff that I yearn for. Whereas at the moment, you know, especially the last few months or so, I feel like whenever I've been getting changed for an event, I have a really hard time with it.
Yep.
I think it's more from that point of view. Like, I just want to be able to pop something on and be out the door and just feel, woo! I just want to be like that. But I'm a bit far from that at the moment.
And the problem is people think that'll go away when I lose weight, or that will go away when I get the body. And they're not trying to manage the problem without seeking that body. So the thing is, you don't have to throw yourself in the deep end. You don't need to go out in a, you know, tiny bikini, a micro bikini. But I say to people, step into the stretch zone. So you've got the stretch zone, and then you've got your panic zone, and a full bikini might be panic zone. But confidence starts with courage. Everyone's like, I want to be more confident. I want to be more confident. It takes courage, and it takes courage to feel uncomfortable. And feeling uncomfortable is about wearing those betas, even though part of your brain is saying, no, you shouldn't do this until your body is better. Because it's like stepping in a cold pool. When you first step in, it's freezing. You're like, I want to get out. This is awful, da-da-da-da. But if you just stay with that discomfort for a bit, you don't feel the water. Then you take the next step and you're like, oh, this is so bad. But if you tolerate the discomfort it brings, if you tolerate that, you'll become conditioned. So it's the same with wearing a bikini. Let's say you wanted to wear a bikini to the beach. Let's start with shorts and a bikini top, right? Let's wear shorts or something like that. Once you become conditioned to that and that doesn't feel as scary because you've stepped into the stretch zone, then you can take it a next step and a next step to the point where you desensitize yourself to the fear.
I really liked that cold water analogy. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So you got to ask yourself, am I stepping into the cold water today, or am I avoiding it? Because avoidance perpetuates a bad body image. And to relate it back to body dysmorphic disorder, which is what you asked me about. So body dysmorphic disorder comes under the obsessive and compulsive related categories. It comes under the OCD branch, right? It's not an eating disorder. And it's this, I actually did my thesis on it. It's a preoccupation with a real or perceived flaw about your appearance. But this flaw might be minor, or it might be slightly noticed by others. Like perhaps you've got a mole on your head, or you've got a bump in your nose, or you've got a big forehead. Like that might be true, but it may also be minor. But when you have body dysmorphic disorder, you focus on this so intently. You may take hours to leave your house. You're either a frequent checker or a frequent avoider. People spend 3 to 6 hours a day body checking the mirror, wearing a hat, covering it, or they avoid mirrors, they avoid everything together. But this flaw causes so much distress and ability to function in your daily life. And it's more than just I'm fat, I'm thin. It's my nose, my skin, my hair. It's a specific body part.
It's very interesting you mentioned the OCD, because I was going to ask you if it was correlated. Not in that kind of way. I'm quite like I mentioned to you earlier, like I haven't fluctuated too much in my body, and I have fluctuated the last few years when the binge eating has gotten worse. And approaching 30, I assume hormones and everything has to do with that as well. But I've been looking at photos that I once saw, and I know I had a few people ask the same question to us as well, which is why I'm mentioning it. But I've looked at photos that I had of myself maybe a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, maybe even earlier, where I remember taking that photo and thinking I looked chunky. Like, how could I ever post this photo? What is wrong with me? And I looked at my grandfather passed last week, so I was going throughout my old phones to look through photos to put him in like a little thing for his funeral, and I found those photos of myself and I'm like, holy shit, I'm hot. Like, what the hell?
Abs.
I had like, I was chiseled. Yeah. And I'm like, what the hell? And I remember, and I was like, why did I not like, what?
Like, why couldn't you just enjoy?
Yeah,
like,
why?
Just be in the moment at the time.
That's happened a few times throughout my life where I've had those moments happen, but it's happening even more now. And I'm realizing, have I had a level of dysmorphia this whole time? And although my OCD is very based upon checking, when it comes to this, it is avoidance. Like, I notice I don't look in, like, I'll look in mirrors on my face because I don't have anything that really bothers me about that. But when you said mole, I have this mole right in between my chest, and I have, for years, I avoided that. Avoided wearing anything that wore that, avoided looking at it, avoided showing it off to anyone, until it got to a point where I actually, your cold water analogy, I slowly got myself more comfortable and more comfortable with showing it. And that
show them all.
Yeah, and it actually, and now I don't give a shit about my mole. If anyone wants to say anything about my mole, I'm like, ugh. But back then, to me, my mole was huge, and now I'm like, oh, my mole's just my mole. But now I'm realizing, like, oh, that could be part of the OCD. Yeah.
The reason it's in the same category as OCD is because there's compulsive behavior designed to neutralize the anxiety. So because I'm so self-conscious of my mole, I'm going to engage in compulsive behavior, covering the mole, putting makeup on it, wearing clothes to alleviate the anxiety that thoughts about that mole bring. Like, oh, people are going to think it's really bad. So that's why it's linked. But when you started to expose it, what did you learn about it or learn about yourself?
I realized that no one else was focusing on it, firstly, so except for myself, and that I also noticed that people kept telling me it was symmetrical, and I was like, oh, I found myself finding that. I'm like, oh, at least it's symmetrical. Like, I could look at, like, I don't know why. And then every time I had like a bad thought about it, I'm like, it's symmetrical, it's fine. But I noticed in myself that I realized, like, I started showing it, like, wearing clothes that exposed it more, probably when I was like 23. I'm 28 now. And I noticed back then I was still working on my way to being a bit more confident in myself and my, like, presence. But I noticed that showing that made me feel like it was okay to be seen. It almost felt like I was never allowed to be seen if I showed, like, it made me not feel like just my mole was being seen. It made me feel like my whole body was being seen and my whole face, in a way that I, like, actually wasn't that little girl sitting in the back of the classroom anymore, kind of way.
The thing is, you have to rewire your brain by teaching it new experiences. The part of the brain that's linked to anxiety and OCD and all that, it learns from experience. So you need to teach it that showing this mole is a safe experience and it's okay. Because once you actually expose yourself to the thing you're so afraid of, the bikini, the going on a first date, showing your mole, the brain learns, hey, I was safe. It was okay. Let's do it again. So you're more likely to reinforce the behavior because you've taught your brain it's not this big, scary, bad thing that's going to ruin your life.
It's so true. That I find that to be true with exposure therapy for my actual OCD as well. Like, every time when I finally do the thing, I'm like, okay, nothing, that didn't happen. Then sometimes you'll do the thing and something will happen, but coincidentally, and then it's like, oh, backwards. But like, most of the time it works itself out and it's fine. Yeah. I've also found, like I mentioned, not to change topics, but I'm going to, so I just mentioned before, my grandfather's passed away over the last week, and that was one of my biggest themes in my OCD. By far the largest theme in my OCD was this fear, and the intrusive thoughts were very much surrounding him and this kind of event happening. And I'm very grateful that I was actually in the room when he did pass, because I feel like that in some way has given me a lot of closure and made me realize how much of my life how actually mentally unwell I probably was without realizing that, how many things I stopped myself from doing, or how many times I stopped myself from seeing him because I was fearful of what my thoughts would do to me in my head. And it was like an exposure therapy that I didn't go out of my way to do, but in some way it's actually been the only thing I think that's ever going to help me be comfortable with that fear I had and that death, and death in general. And it's still been, it hasn't happened that long ago. It was only 2 weeks ago, but it really goes to show, like, I really believe in exposure therapy. Like I truly, like I feel like by far that's been the most helpful thing in my life.
For OCD and anxiety, it's a must. You can't think your way out of the problem. You have to lean into the problem and lean into fear. And exactly like you said, sorry to hear about your grandfather and your loss. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to people with OCD is something that is their fear. So for many people during the pandemic, they developed OCD and they were so scared they'd get the pandemic, they'd get COVID and die. And the best thing they could do is get COVID, because that's exposure therapy, and showed them that they weren't going to die and their world wasn't going to end. So they know, even with all these rituals and cleaning and sanitizing, I still got it. So it proves the OCD wrong.
I actually found the same with the pandemic, because for many years before the pandemic happened, I would have this existential crisis feeling that like, oh my God, this is going to happen and like the world's going to end and everyone's going to thing. And then something like the pandemic happening actually kind of I was the most relaxed, besides the binge eating, let's be honest. But besides that, I was probably the most relaxed in my mind I had been in years, because I felt like I was handling something I had already prepared for so many years that by the time it came, I was like, oh, okay, like I don't have to stress about it anymore. And now I'm not, like the existential, I've noticed that those kind of themes have sort of lessened over time with it. But yeah, I feel like, yeah, sometimes it really is true that like the thing that you're the most fearful of, sometimes you need that to happen for you to realize like it's not, like it's bigger in your head, especially when you haven't, like in my case, I had never lost someone before. That's why it was like this big thing hanging over my head. And now that it's happened, it's like, it's so much bigger because you've never experienced it before, and you can add whatever you want into it. And unfortunately for me, like the limit does not exist as to what I can add in it. So
yes,
yeah.
And I think accepting the worst case scenario sets you free.
I agree.
Accepting that I'm going to wear bathers to the beach and someone may come up to me and say, you're disgusting. If that happens, I can handle it. By accepting the worst case scenario, and it might happen, you will be emotionally set free.
I feel like we've really hit the mark with everything.
Yes.
I feel like this has been so good.
Thank you so much.
Amazing.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm actually, this whole time I'm like, maybe she's got like availability for clients, because I'm really struggling. Like, I did want to touch on limerence because it has blown my mind, right? Yes. So I've been watching your videos and I've noticed you speak about limerence a lot. Blew my mind when I first watched them, because I had never heard of this term before, and this is definitely something that not only myself has experienced, but I can see in a lot of my friends and my family members as well. Yeah, if you could go into limerence a little bit and then explain like how to differentiate, like how is it different to love, and how can you kind of like, how do you realize when you're in limerence? Because I feel like that's a very hard thing to, when you're in it, to realize that you're doing.
Yes, and I want to first start by clarifying that limerence, it's not a diagnosis, it's not some sort of mental health condition. It's a state. It's just a state of mind. It's a state of being in, and it's just a state of having an intense longing for another person, even though they don't fully reciprocate. So as a kid, you can have, this obsession with someone, or even a fictional character, and the limerent person struggles to think about anything else except their crush. And on the extreme end of the scale, they may neglect their social life, their work, their responsibilities. It was first discovered by a psychologist in 1970, Dorothy Tenov, when she conducted a series of interviews and noticed some people's experience of love were particularly intense. She found that this intense feeling can affect anyone, regardless of gender, age, culture, or any other trait. And it's a growing interest, especially in the neurodiverse world, but it's still in its very early stages, so we don't know too much about it. But essentially, I think the reason people who are neurodiverse, ADHD, or especially on the autism spectrum can relate to it is because they can fixate on people. So we know people with ADHD can hyperfocus or hyperfixate on something they're really interested in. Yes, it can be a person. And also people on the spectrum have fixed interests, and they can have a fixed interest on a person as well. So I think that's why many people with neurodiversity can relate to this state.
I agree with you. I feel like that is probably why it's like very easy to just get like, it's almost as easy as me like getting fixated with chess when I was in like grade 2. I was like very into chess and all I could talk about was chess. But I've had moments in time where that's the only thing I can do and it's about a person as well. And and it almost feels the same way, like the passion is just the same.
Yes, about chess and someone.
Yes, I really like chess.
And the thing is, you both have to like chess. You said, what's the difference between love and limerence? Love requires a real meaningful connection with another person, and the other person reciprocates. I mean, you can be in love with someone, but real love, it's a real meaningful connection, whereas limerence could be, you know, with someone you've never met. It could be with someone who
like
has
a
no
celebrity
idea.
or something.
Yeah.
It could be this state about lust and chasing after someone, and it's all about the chase. And I think the reason with ADHD it's so attractive is because people with ADHD do have sensation-seeking needs. They are impulsive. It's exciting for them as well. So I think it meets that need as well. So I think there's massive differences. I think love is reciprocal. It goes two ways in most cases, but limerence is an obsession. You can't stop thinking about it. You might neglect other parts of your life, whereas you can love someone but still live your life. And limerence can bring about stress and other, negative aspects, whereas love can involve communication and all that. So that's the main difference.
I agree with that. My next question would be around it is when you notice you're in that state, how can you kind of work out of, like, because if I'm hyper focused on something, for example, or when I speak to a friend that is experiencing limerence, or I believe is experiencing limerence, it's very difficult to unfocus from that situation. How would you suggest they go about, like, would it just be therapy, I assume?
Yeah, and therapy is always a great step for anyone listening that wants to, unpack whatever's going on. It's really about becoming aware of it, which I think is tricky for people. So there's different stages of limerence. And look, this is what is believed. I don't know if they've done extensive studies on this or what. The research is exactly up to date, but the 3 stages they believe happen is infatuation. And this is where you're sort of addictive, you're thinking about it 24 hours a day, you get the heart palpitations, you may feel really drawn to this person. It's this uncontrollable desire for someone. And then the next stage is believed to be called crystallization. So while that infatuation is unlikely to go away, the second stage is all about solidifying that idea. You start to believe that this person is going to solve all your problems. You decide that the person is flawless. You idealize them. You put them on a pedestal. And this can kind of look like splitting in borderline personality disorder, where you put people on a pedestal and then you devalue them. And then the third stage is deterioration. So reality sneaks in. You start to realize you'll never have that person, or it's not going to work out. It has to go both ways. So the final stage of limerence is that disappointment in the person or the object. It's about letting them go and realizing nothing's going to happen. So I think if you can recognize limerence happening, also validate that this is sort of a cycle and it is going to come to an end. And the sooner you can realize and identify the reality that, hey, this person just may not be into you, this is negatively affecting your life, you can start to wean away from it or take steps to move away from that obsession.
Would you say that you could sort of almost use the same approach we discussed before with the cold water sort of scenario, where you'd slowly slowly not stalking them that day or not check? Because I do notice a pattern with, I'm not going to say who they are, but like a friend, where checking is a massive, like they can't stop doing the checking habit of checking their socials or checking where they are or checking what they're doing or checking if they've replied. And so could you use that same cold water method of like, okay, today I'm going to be okay with like not checking my phone and just checking where they're at today, or not stalking their profile together? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Relationships, and when it's like a breakup, when you break up with someone, the part of your brain that gives you dopamine and oxytocin and all that good stuff, it's going through withdrawals. Now, the reason people get that hit or get that need met when they go through a breakup is they stalk the socials, or what's he doing, or where's his Snapchat, or where's her Snapchat. And momentarily, it's like you're giving your brain cocaine, or you're giving it some dopamine because you're like, I checked, I scratched the itch. It's like an OCD compulsion. Yeah. And exactly what you said, you have to withdraw. You have to go through the limerence withdrawal symptoms of not checking their socials. Sit with that discomfort, sit with that pain, sit with that. But over time, it's going to get easier. So yes, that's the first thing. The second thing is building a loving relationship with yourself. So a lot of people believe, or it's thought to be, that underneath limerence is the fear of being with yourself and making a good enough loving relationship with yourself. Someone who has, a strong self-concept, really knows who they are, knows their values, knows their worth, aren't necessarily going to be too worried if someone doesn't reciprocate their feelings. Sure, it hurts, but there's plenty more fish in the sea. So it could be about, how do I build a loving relationship with myself? How do I create a secure attachment within myself? Because this feeds into attachment styles as well. Yeah, like you might have an anxious attachment, and this might be meeting that need. So it's about building your secure attachment within yourself.
I don't have any other questions really, but thank you so much for going through that with me.
Oh my God, and for just sitting with us and explaining everything.
Yeah.
Like, it was just so good.
You're so informative and you're so full of life. Like, for someone that's working in such a clinical kind of field, like, you're full of life and energy. Like, you being on social media is probably the best person to be on social media, because you're explaining things in a way that's so digestible. It's really, really good.
Oh my God, yeah.
Thank you so much. And I think honestly, social media is what gives me that balance. It allows me to be creative and expressive and just, help people in a different capacity. So I really love it, and I'm very grateful, and I'm grateful for anyone who's listened to this episode. Thank you so much. Don't hesitate to reach out and ask any questions. And if you are struggling with your relationship with food, make sure you can download my free binge tracker. You can grab my book, use the code MINDFOOD20 if you want a discount, and get in touch.
I just want to end on a light question now, something hopefully easy for you to answer. But if you had to pick one or two songs that you have an emotional connection with, and why, what would they be?
I thought about this. I think one that comes to mind immediately, I was out with my friends the other night and we were all just dancing, having the best time. And this song just always comes out when you're out. And it's Whitney Houston, Oh, I want to dance with somebody.
What a song.
I want to feel the heat
with somebody.
Yeah.
It really just fulfills your insides.
It does.
Yeah. I don't know what it is. And I think it always comes up when you're dancing. You're like, I just want to dance with somebody. And it's been around for a long time. So I feel there's been so many different stages of my life where that song has come up. And different. Yeah. It's like, when you're young and in the club and you're like, I just really want to meet that person. And then you hear it when you've met that person and you're like, did it, Whitney?
That's so true.
So that was one that came to mind. And then this being a completely different stage and hearing that song and just being like, life is good.
I love that. That's so
really
beautiful.
like that too.
Life is good. You're like living life in Bali right now.
I know.
Basically TikTok famous. Look at you.
I'm very blessed. I feel very lucky and grateful to be here.
I love that for you.
And did you have one more song to tell us, or was that it for now?
One more song. This is so not what people are going to expect.
I'm excited.
I think it's Give Me Everything Tonight. Give me
with Pitbull, right?
Neo, Afrojack, and Pitbull. Yeah. Yes, because Pitbull's in every song.
I love that.
But I
love Pitbull.
Because we may not get tomorrow, let's do it tonight.
Don't care what they say, what games they play. I actually danced to that the other night at my friend's baby's christening, and we always play that song because she's like obsessed with Pitbull. But that really does hit differently.
It does. That's a great song.
it hits differently in all contexts. It hits differently when you're at a wedding. It hits differently when you're out. It hits differently when you're just putting your makeup on. But it's so true. It's like, give me everything because we may not get tomorrow. Let's do it tonight.
I love
Is
that.
that what the,
Yeah,
I
you
just
did
Googled
good.
the lyrics.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
Look, I think there is reference to alcohol in there and other things, but I'm going to create my own
that's
meaning.
fine.
And it's about,
Yeah.
we may not get tomorrow, so make the best of your life now and enjoy it.
I love that. That's all
That's
that matters.
perfect.
It's true. Like that's the basis of life is just like just enjoy and live life right now. We don't know how long we're going to be on this world.
So true.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, love that. This has been one of the best interviews I've had. Thank you so
Really,
much.
I've been like stressing out in my usual fashion of rejection dysphoria, but like
It's so much to
No,
us.
not at all. I think it was just very true and deep and unstructured, which I like. I think it's the same questions like, what is ADHD? What are the symptoms? And that's all important. But I think we covered a whole trajectory of other subtopics and good practical techniques too that people can try.
I think so too. I think the cold water scenario, I feel like you've
really
explained
like
that in a way that it's like explaining to someone how to leave their comfort zone without just saying you're going to leave your comfort zone. Like,
Yeah, I know. What does that mean?
Yeah,
But you
exactly.
actually explained it.
How do you do
It's
it?
good.
yeah. Talk about feeling seen. Talk about me oversharing as per usual.
You
I
wouldn't
think I was
be you
supposed to.
without the oversharing, Elle. It's like we said in the episode. You wouldn't be who you are without being who you are.
I agree. I actually was thinking about that a little bit more after we recorded that. And I was realizing that though, and this is for anyone else that's probably in a similar situation with me and has a fair few different diagnoses, I noticed that the parts of me you can have, there's so many other people I meet that have the same diagnosis as me or something similar.
Yeah.
But we're still different.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And we've still
yeah.
got different values, different strengths, different belief systems. And at the end of the day, that's like what I'm focusing on. It's like, as a whole, who am I and who do I want to be? And I think that has been really, really helpful in like realizing that the disorders, yes, they are part of me and they're parts I love and sometimes don't like about myself. But it's the part of me to my core that my values and who I choose to be that define who I am, I suppose, in my mind.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's very-
Exactly.
and Steph helped me realize that too a little bit more and more each time we spoke to, like each sentence she said really opened my mind.
I know. I felt like I learnt so much within a space of an hour.
Me too.
To be honest, one thing I loved learning about in this whole interview was limerence.
Me too.
Such a fascinating topic.
I think it's really, really cool. Like, because I think a lot of people have had that kind of infatuation feeling with someone.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to know why you're feeling so strongly, why it's taking over so much of your life and why you can't control yourself sometimes. And not understanding whether or not it's love and not understanding whether or not it's just like obsession to some extent
or just a crush.
Yeah,
even.
or just a crush. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think without me hearing what that was from her, like I can think back to so many times in my life where that was the case. So many times, and I've looked into it a little bit more since then. I don't think that this is like, if you're had that feeling for years and you're like, no, I have to be in love with someone because it's been years that I've been feeling this way. That can also be, it doesn't just go away within like
doesn't
a
just
couple
go
of weeks.
away.
Yeah. Like I definitely really think if you're someone that kind of relates to that, or you're thinking that that might be what you're going through right now, really check it out and look into content about it, because it's really been very helpful for me to kind of give closure to past versions of myself, I think.
Most definitely. It definitely it has led me to think about myself as a teenager.
Yeah.
And I definitely had those characteristics where I would just crush on someone so hard.
Yeah.
And it was consuming.
Yeah, all consuming, yeah.
Yeah. So and I think back and it's like, those were really hard to get out of.
Very difficult. It felt like, and I think because the emotions are so high and low, it traps you in that state.
For sure.
At least in my opinion. I always found that like me and one of my other friends, we would always talk about how we had crushes that like no one else could relate to sometimes. Like, and it was there was so much intensity, and our other friends were like, oh, I have crushes on people, but it's not like that.
Oh, yeah.
And so for years we were like, we just feel love in such a different intense way than everyone else. But to some extent it was probably just limerence.
So interesting.
Yeah, it's like disheartening yet very, very like closure giving at the same time. I think with everything when it comes to mental health or things that you learn about yourself in that way, it's all like two ends of a stick.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Two ends of a stick?
Double-edged sword?
Yeah.
Is that the
double-edged
saying?
sword. Yeah, that probably is what I'm trying to say.
I hope what I'm saying is right.
No, I think you're right. Double-edged sword is a saying that people say.
All right. Well, guys, please make sure to check out Steph's socials. She's excellent. We highly recommend her content.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if she's taking clients or anything on at the moment. I'm sure she's like packed with her actual work. I'm keen.
Yeah, me too.
Like I'm like, oh, that I've never felt that related to or understood so clearly by, and I've seen a lot of psychologists. It just makes me so happy that there's people out there that are sharing their information and their knowledge with the world in such a digestible way. It's really important.
I agree.
And it's people like her that are making a difference in mental health around the world.
Most definitely. Steph, we love you.
We love you so much.
We love you so much.
We cannot wait to meet you one day.
Oh my gosh, cannot wait. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to follow all of our socials and to follow the podcast on any podcast platform that you enjoy.
Yes, and if you like what you're listening to, please rate us a 5 out of 5. It helps us out.
Oh, does it help?
It does help.
It does help a lot, yes. All right, guys, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.
Bye. 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 Bye.